a really well-made plate of food. Those simple things in life really can change a person's day. So for me, it's seeing that change. It's witnessing the joy in people when we do something that is outside of what they expect, which is most of what we do.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There are many people who start a career in hospitality but then move on to other fields. There are a few, however, that start a career in hospitality, leave, and then come back to that career and build on their roots. Pete Dillon is the GM and director at Hotel Canberra in Ballarat. Pete, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Huck. Today I'm also the window washer because I've windows to wash this afternoon. I've just finished doing some housekeeping to make up one of our bedrooms, and I'm sure at some point someone's going to need me to make a coffee.
Well, that's the life of hospitality, isn't it? And it interests me that although you've been in and around food your whole career in hospitality, but actually in the nuts and bolts of it, it was sort of at the beginning, and now you're back there. What lured you back into that sort of world?
Look, I think I ask myself this question every day. When post-COVID, I quick little story. I was looking at perhaps buying a property in France and taking some time, 2 or 3 months a year, to go over there and work. I was consulting at the time, so I kind of had the freedom to be able to work whatever hours I wanted to. And then COVID hit, and France just ended up, that whole idea went in the bin. And then I started looking around to think, well, what am I doing? I've got to have a bit of a plan for the next 5 or 10 years. And I met my now husband, and it was very weird. On our first date, I was kind of like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It was like a job interview. And in his mind was the idea of having a place in the country. What he didn't know is I'd already looked at 5 places in the country, and the next place we looked at together only 3 or 4 months after our first date.
Wow.
I know, right? So we came to Ballarat. The day was irreverently cold. It was rain coming in sideways. It was one of those beautiful Ballarat winter days for which we were completely unprepared. I was working with let's call him a chef and businessman in Melbourne, and I'd just taken the day so that we came out on the train thinking, this is going to be a lovely little journey. We'll walk to the hotel, see how it all goes. Literally froze ourselves near to death, walked into the hotel, and I took one look at Jigs, and Jigs took one look at me, and we kind of went, okay, I think now we're in some trouble, because we both almost immediately felt like we were drawn to this building and this property. We looked around and kind of went, there's a lot we need to change. The ideas, everything we needed for our ideas was there. We wanted kind of an almost nothing bucolic and quaint, because that's not really us, but we wanted a dining room because Jigs is a chef, a very talented chef. We wanted some accommodation so people could come and eat and drink and stay. So we wanted somewhere we could have a bar. What we got were some heritage listed stables, a cafe, some accommodation, a restaurant, a bar, 2 kitchens that were not at that point functional, and a whole lot of stuff. So so here we are, almost 3 years later from our move, and we still look at one another and go, are we sure we should be doing this?
How different is sort of the hospitality world, the nuts and bolts that you're into now, compared to, when you were young, when you were in that, before you moved into comms and brand and marketing and all that sort of stuff?
For me, the fundamentals of this industry have never changed. I grew up in a very large family, and food for us was really an afterthought. I think I tell guests in our restaurant, we named the restaurant for my mother, by the way. She couldn't cook. And this whole idea of food for my mother was keeping us alive. It was a means to stave off starvation. Whereas while that was all going on, there was also always a space at our table for some poor bedraggled child that one of us had dragged home. I'm one of 10 kids, so one of us was always dragging somebody into the house and, can they stay for dinner? And ultimately my parents would go without food so that we could feed that child, unbeknownst to us. So there was this whole idea of there is always a seat at the table. My dad only ever drank long necks of Melbourne bitter. He died when I was in my early 20s, and he would love the fact that we've named a bar for him, because anything that we brought into our house, we'd get together Easter, Christmas, what have you, when most of us had moved on. If any of us bought anything other than beer, Dad would be like, "Oh, what's that cat's piss you're drinking?" So I described the bar that we have here, which is beautiful, stunning, in this gorgeous old Art Deco building, as a bar full of cat's piss. Plus, we have long necks of Melbourne bitter, because that was all my dad drank. So that whole idea of hospitality as a function has never changed, and I don't think it will ever change. And we can have all of the AI bots in the world, we can have all of the celebrity chefs cooking over fire with the tears of virgins, but we will never replace that ability to have somebody walk into a dining room, into a bar, into a cafe, into a space, and be made to feel welcome and comfortable and relaxed. And I think that's the very first fundamental of this game for me. Is we talk about, and I will keep saying we talk about, because this is my husband and myself, also my brother, who's part of the business, which adds an interesting layer of complexity we might come to. We have talked about this from day one, that we feel like we're welcoming you into our home. So we will sit you down, we'll make sure you're comfortable, we'll make sure you're relaxed. There's no starched napkins, there's no nobody's wearing a jacket or a tie. This is all very relaxed, very casual. And we want you to feel like you can lick your plate or take off your shoes or whatever it's going to take to make you feel comfortable in our space. We're serving food that is at a three-hatted level. Our food is exquisite. But we don't want to overwhelm anybody that comes through the door, because they may not have had that kind of experience before. We kind of, it sounds a bit vain, but we feel like we're a bit of a gateway between that kind of high-end, everything polished, everything stiff, everything precise and measured, and the place where a young family or a young couple will go and have a bite to eat and feel comfortable. I think we're in this very happy place in between, where a plumber and his wife, and she might be a plumber also, can come to the venue and feel like they're absolutely comfortable, but at the same time they're sitting next to one of Ballarat's preeminent surgeons, or who runs the law firm, or who is the head of the committee for Ballarat, or the CEO or the chairman of a local organisation. It's very much that kind of diversity in the dining room that we really feel like we've been able to manage, because of the fact that I'm in a t-shirt and a pair of jeans and some trainers. I just don't want people to feel uncomfortable. And that's why we kind of keep talking about this. Like, it's like you're coming into our home, and we want you to kick back and relax and enjoy the hospitality you would get in our house.
Yeah, amazing. You detailed sort of what you were confronted with the building, but the opportunities that were ahead. Do you have any stories of what it took to transform it into what we see now, sort of three years later?
Yeah. I've got a lot of stories. It was, first of all, we had to take everything out. We have these gold Tiffany chairs in our dining room, and when we walked in, I looked and I said, I hate them. I looked at the chandeliers, which are these beautiful, made of very fine chain. They look like a flapper dress on a woman from the 1920s. I looked at them and I went, oh my God, I hate those chandeliers. I hate those chairs. It was only when we took everything out and had a bare space, and then we started putting things back in, I went, oh my God, those chandeliers are stunning. These chairs look perfect in this room. So it was very, very full. It was very busy. It had been used for high teas, some functions, and it had been operated by people who thought that putting the empty moe boxes up on the glass shelves was a really good way of making those glass shelves look nice. I took all that down and I put up, beautiful. There's beautiful. I've got an obsession with good wine glasses, with glassware, because against mirrored shelves they look beautiful. So once we cleared everything out and took away the tiaras and the feathered swans that were stuck to the wall and that kind of stuff, we ended up with a lovely blank space that we could then turn around and say, what do we want this to look like? Everything is consultative. There are no unilateral decisions in this business. So what do we want this to look like? How do we want people to feel? We do have white tablecloths because the room needs lifting. We have local art on the walls done by a photographer. They're very understated, but they lend something to the room. We have this huge pedestal Art Deco 7-8 foot lights that, placed appropriately in the room, look amazing. We have some old Art Deco furniture that are our waiter stations. We have then kind of gone, okay, what do we need on the table? So I've got some blue Moroccan glass. It's just a really comfortable, warm room that takes away any feeling of pretension or anything that's going to overwhelm someone, because again, we don't know the background of our diners. We just know that every person that walks in the door, and this goes back to those kind of fundamentals of hospitality that lie in 5-star hotels. Every guest that comes in our door is the same as the next guest or the one before. Nobody's more or less important. And we want everybody to feel like that they are, for that second or for that minute, the most important person in the room.
The name of the venue, Hotel Canberra, is fascinating to me. Do you know the history of the building and its importance in the area?
Yeah, so there's been a hotel on this corner since 1858. The first couple were kind of hay and corn stores, a butchery, a drinking house. They burned down, and this building itself was completed in about 1889. So she's 130 plus years old. Some days I feel like I'm 100 plus 30 years old. So it has all of those queer little foibles that old buildings have. It has beautiful high ceilings and original ceiling roses and stuff, but the floors can, on some days, not all days, just be a tiny bit uneven, because we're dealing with something that was built for its time and certainly not built for this time. In 1913, so the hotel's had a series of names. It was the Cornubian, and then it was the Rose of Denmark, and then for a long time was the Vine Hotel. And we've still got ornamental grapevines in the yards that have now grown over these kind of heritage listed stables that are 100 plus years old. In 1913, the then publican decided, Mr. Ronalds, Ballarat was actually slated as, or was bidding to be the nation's capital. Melbourne was acting as the capital city of Australia. Ballarat was one of those cities that thought it had the potential to be the nation's capital. So the very enterprising Mr. Ronalds decided he would rename the hotel from the Vine to the Canberra. The name Canberra had been chosen for our national capital, but I don't think they had yet chosen the final destination. Fast forward through a world war and to 1927, when Canberra as a city was actually opened, the then publican was kind of going, oh, well, why are we called the Canberra? It's a very obscure word that is in one dialect of Indigenous language that means meeting place. That's not knowledge that they would have had in 1913. So we kind of are led to believe, from the bit of history we've been able to understand, is that this was the reason. So we knew Ballarat had been bidding to be the nation's capital, and so we think that the enterprising team kind of went, well, why don't we just rename it the Canberra? Because if we become Canberra, we are the hotel for the city.
What's it been like for you? Sort of the last couple of years, has it changed you and sort of the way you feel about your craft?
Yes. 2024, and I don't think you'll find a hospitality operator anywhere in this country that'll disagree that 2024 was probably one of the worst years that we've seen in 40 years, in my 40 years in the game. I remember when the fringe benefits tax came in and it was going to kill business lunches. It didn't. The GST was going to kill the industry. It didn't. The pilot strike was going to kill the industry. It didn't. COVID was going to kill the industry. And I think what we saw from COVID was those operators that were able to operate through things like Providor and Uber Eats and all of those things, we spent a lot of time as operators keeping those people alive. Those businesses alive, and I'm really proud we did that. And that kind of post-COVID, I won't call it a hangover because it's the opposite of a hangover, that post-COVID elation where the minute venues were open, and I know this was my story in particular, the minute that we could go somewhere, I was there, because I'm ultimately a social animal and I wanted to be out. And we had been cooped up in and out of lockdowns for so long that freedom to go and have a pint at the pub at the end of my street, to go and have a glass of wine in my favorite restaurant, to go and sit down and eat a plate of food and see the smiles on the faces of chefs, a sense of relief. I don't think any of that compares to what we went through in 2024. And I think that was a whole bunch of external circumstances that are beyond our control, the hike in all of our fixed costs. Rents went up, electricity went up, our insurance went up. All of those fixed costs went up, food costs went up, and the consumer, because of no changes to interest rates or raises in interest rates, the consumer sat back and went, I'm not spending my money. This is, I've got to be really careful. So people that were coming in and having a bottle of wine or two on a Friday night and a plate of cheese or some snacks in our bar, I remember very, very vividly a conversation with one of my customers who said, I'm now going to Dan Murphy's and buying 2 reasonable bottles of wine. I'm probably paying a third or half of what I would pay when I'm in your venue. We stop and buy some cheese, and we have our people at home because we still want to do what we do on Friday night, but we need to make it a thing that is affordable to us. And we know that some of our friends can't afford to come and sit and partake in what we would normally do. So that was a real challenge for us. And we kind of, I won't say we buried our heads in the sand, but we looked and we kept going on with this optimism of this will change, this will change. It's related to winter. It's related to, we kind of found an excuse for everything it was related to, and none of the fact that the industry, not just hospitality, but retail, any kind of service, barbers going under, hairdressers not having people, gift shops and retail outlets just kind of falling apart because consumer spending had dropped so significantly. And while that had happened, all our fixed costs were going up. So we're looking at one another going, how are we going to generate the revenue we need to be able to manage this? And ultimately, we couldn't. So we came to a position late last year where we had to make a very significant decision. We made that decision. It took us 10 weeks to flip our business from almost insolvency to being able to show a profit. And we did that because we worked with a financial administrator to help us through that process. It did inordinate damage to our business. We still have people coming in saying, I thought you were closed, because by the time some of the press got hold of a story and 2 and 2 equals 24, we kind of went through a process. We had incredible support from our regular customer base who were like, how can we help you? And I'm like, you come and you bring your friends and you spend, you come and get a coffee, you come and have lunch, you come and sit in the bar and have a glass of wine. You don't have to have the bottle and have a couple of plates of snacks. And what we've seen as a result of our change in thinking, and that change has been fantastic. So, we're on a positive trajectory. We're seeing our income go up. We're seeing our fixed costs, because of what we learned, reduced. We've got a far tighter wage cost than we ever had. And that doesn't come from us working any harder, because we're all working as many hours as we can in the business and doing that as volunteers. We ultimately kind of got to the point where none of us can keep volunteering in our business. We have to earn a living. We're not doing this to be slaves. We're doing this to kind of build something that we're incredibly proud of. And so we flicked a switch, and ultimately in the end of January, we kind of came out of that process going, okay, we have learned so much. We've grown, we've developed some tools that we need to kind of take this forward, and ultimately we're in a much stronger position. So a couple of hard decisions in there too, I guess.
It's amazing that you got to that decision point and took the leap. You've helped so many hospitality businesses over your career when you haven't been running a venue. Do you feel like there's a reluctancy to accept change or confront change in the industry for so many of those businesses?
I don't think it's a reluctance to accept change. I think it's at times there's a reluctance to accept the position we're in, and we're really good at what we do. All of us that run businesses are not doing this because it's fun. We're doing this because it's bloody hard work. We're passionate. We're committed to kind of fulfilling a promise that we've given our customer, and so accepting that's not working is incredibly challenging, because it kind of goes to the core of, am I good enough to be even doing this? And it forces us to be, I guess, ferociously introspective and kind of go, how have I cocked this up? But we haven't. It's just the industry has changed around us, and that ability and at times the financial capacity to make those changes is sometimes a bridge too far. And many businesses are also running on 0 or 1% margins, and you can't turn around and drop $25,000 on a new pizza oven or a new piece of kit or a refurb or a rebrand, because the reason we're in that position is we don't have that cash flow in the first place. So it really is looking at every facet and function of the business and working out how do we do this more efficiently? How do we do this better without sacrificing our standards and the brand and the image that we've created? And that was a really hard call for us, Huck. It was incredibly tough. And I had to listen more to what Jigsy and my brother's not a hospitality person, but I had to listen to what those two had to say rather than kind of going, I know it all, don't try and push me on this. So we ultimately kind of rethought what we were doing, and it worked. I'm not going to say it'll work for everyone, but it worked for us. And I'm incredibly grateful that they pushed me to the point to say, we have to make a change.
Yeah. At the top of the show, we sort of talked about how you started a career in hotels and hospitality, then moved into marketing and branding, and then back again. Take us back to that time when you were young. What were the sort of really important roles that sort of started to carve your career in hotels and hospitality?
I remember I grew up in the country in regional Victoria, and I did the bulk of my apprenticeship as a chef in a local hospital, and at the same time kind of moonlighted at one of the pubs in town. So I kind of saw a chance to flex the creative muscle at the pub while doing what was fairly rudimentary. We had a really clever menu for its time in the hospital. However, it was still food that was made in large quantities. And so those basic skills were never going to kind of disappear for me because I was doing things in big volumes. So I had to be efficient, had to be quick and really time managed. Once I left and kind of went to the big city, and I tried my hand in kitchens for a while and realised that they were not the place that I needed to be. And there was a couple of guys that I was working for in Melbourne who had multiple venues, and I kind of went to them one day and said, look, I think this person is ripping you off. I'm watching stuff from behind the scenes. I think this is going on. Ultimately, I was correct, and they offered me that person's job. And that person's job was as a restaurant manager. And I kind of went, am I ready for this? And I thought, okay, how do I take those skills that I already have? How do I take the knowledge that I've got and make that work? And for probably the next 4 or 5 years, I think I was eminently underqualified for every job I had. And I think the big change for me was going to probably what was the best hotel in the country at the time, which was the Sheraton Mirage in Port Douglas. Left the safety of my safety net of Victoria. Went to Port Douglas, knew nobody, and kind of was chucked in this island of 600 hospitality people from across the world. I made lifelong friends, and I still call. That's where I first met Hilary McNevin. She and I worked together. This is 30 plus years ago. I still have lifelong friends from that experience, and what that did was give me a very deep and thoughtful understanding of what this industry is and not what I thought it was. That was a massive turning point. I then went and worked in hotels in Japan, and I helped build a hotel from a tiny little motel to an 80-room property with incredible food and beverage facilities in what was then close to a third world country in Vanuatu. I then kind of went and I'd worked in Japan in hotels over there with very little Japanese language skill. And I just kept taking really big risks for jobs that I wanted. And when I got them, it was, okay, I'm here now. How do I make sure, that whole imposter syndrome thing is there. But how do I make sure that I don't mess this up? So look, there was incredible learning curves along the way and decisions that I made that were probably not the best decisions for my career or for my life. There was a lot of stuff going on underneath that was incredibly challenging. I hadn't come out. I hadn't talked about being or surviving some fairly violent sexual abuse as a child that had gone on for a year and a half. So I wrote a little piece recently that was just kind of like, I got up every day and I put on a mask. I put on a costume, and every day was a costume party, and that was utterly exhausting. And it was only really when I did come to that decision at kind of 29 to tell the world who I was, and the reason that I had held on for telling them for so long was when life just did a 180 for me, and I almost started my 20s again.
Wow. That period of time to make that decision to do that, but then what impact did it have on you, and like what was it like to go through to reveal that and be yourself?
It was so much easier than I ever imagined it would be because everybody around me knew. Everybody around me was kind of like, well, we've been waiting for this. My family, my father had died 6 or 7 years before, and my siblings were all like, okay, is he going to tell us this week? Or this month or this year. So there was, but I had to go and have some help to kind of unpack and separate what was my sexuality and what was childhood trauma. And once I had the tools to do that, I was able to then say, okay, this is who I am as a person. This is Pete. This is gay Pete. This is outrageously camp at times Pete. This is serious Pete over here. But then this other Pete that is this kind of very bruised, challenged, frightened, terrorized kid. He can stand over here kind of on his own and tell that story because these two things are not connected. And kind of unpacking that. It was like undoing the world's longest shoelaces in your shoes. Every time you open another lace, there was kind of another thread to be undone that. And that allowed me then to kind of slowly shed all of those costumes, get rid of them, and just confront the world as this is me. And I'm not scared of who that person is now. It's taken a while to get there, but I'm not scared of who that person is. And it now allows me to be authentic with people. And a late in life, 4 or 5 years ago, diagnosis of PTSD and autism was a really overwhelming yet very encouraging thing because all of a sudden all these things that I thought made me weird were in fact diagnostic markers for a condition that I've never explored.
What impact did it have on you exploring that and opening that up?
It was traumatic for a period, and then it was. It's kind of like I remember somebody telling me after my dad died. There's all these stages of grief, and you keep walking. You walk into grief through the front door, and you keep walking in and out of rooms, and each room has a different kind of emotion for you, and you ultimately walk out the back door. And this is very much was like walking in the front door of a house and going, okay, well that room over there is depression, and that room over there is some joy, and that room down the back is fear and hatred, and this room over here is why me, question why, all of those things. But ultimately, I kind of went through all of those processes. I had amazing people around me who helped me to negotiate and navigate and kind of encourage my sense of self-worth. And then ultimately walked out the back door feeling ever so much more strong and powerful and just really kind of owning what my identity was. But it was there were very dark periods. I was, there was suicide ideation. There was all sorts of things because I never felt like I was worthy. And that kind of reflected in my career, I think, for a long time as well through my 20s where it wasn't so much imposter syndrome as a result of trauma that I had never faced.
From afar, I've seen you do all sorts of things and almost, I want to say jack of all trades, but, often that's someone that isn't actually very good at many things. But you've been able to adapt and evolve to so many different roles with success through your career. And I'm interested about that sort of change that you made that moved into sort of a journalism, a marketing, branding, that sort of area. What was that like career-wise for you to make that move?
It was initially an accident. The funny story. My mum had been diagnosed with dementia. I was living and working in Sydney. I had my own business. I was doing crazy hours and 7 days a week and not really having a life. And then I thought, this has to stop. I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 40 if I don't take better care of myself. So I wound down that business and my mum had been diagnosed with dementia and I had been having long conversations with one of my sisters about kind of heading back to Melbourne and being there as part of my mum's care. And so I went and did what was going to be a 12-month stint out in a wilderness resort in the back of the Hunter Valley. And that lasted 3 months because the isolation was brutal for me. I don't know that I've ever quite felt as alone at times as I did there because there was nowhere to, run down to the pub or a cafe or something and sit and have a coffee and just look at the world go by. It was incredibly isolating and allowed me to kind of take some time to go, okay, I know how I need to operate. I know where I need to be for this to work. So I went back to Melbourne and I just thought, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know whether I want to stay in hospitality. I don't know what is going to be my my direction. So to keep my mind active, I took some temp work. And ultimately, while I was looking at spreadsheets in a parts section for Toyota, I got a call from the agent. Yeah, no, that was never fun. But the autistic brain's going boom, 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 boom. There's a mistake. Boom, boom, boom. There's a mistake. So my the agency I was working for, I rang them and I said, I can't do this. I will literally throw myself in front of a car. Because I was in this very same situation where I was in a demountable building in the back of Altona in Melbourne, ultimately on my own with all these spreadsheets. I'm like, I can't do this. So I rang the agency and they said, look, how would you feel about the ABC? And it was like somebody had just offered me a second Christmas for the year. And I went, yep, I mean, whatever you have to do, do it. So I went to what was then ABC New Media and Digital Services. We would now call that ABC Online or ABC Digital. And it worked as just in a support role and did that for, it was supposed to be 6 weeks. I think I was there for, I don't know, 5 months or something. And they ultimately hired someone for that role, which wasn't me, which was fun. And we'd had a little farewell party because I'd made lovely friends, little farewell party on the Thursday night. And I went in on Friday to kind of clean up my stuff. I was in a pair of shorts, a pair of thongs. I smelled like I was just heaving alcohol out of every one of my pores. And I got a call from another division who said, "Oh, can you come and see me? I'm going on maternity leave in 2 weeks. I need someone to backfill this role for 9 months, and you've come recommended." And I kind of went, "Yeah, but I smell like a brewery and I look like rubbish." So I went down and chatted to this girl. And the following Monday, I started with ABC Rural. And so it took 9 months, and kind of in my lunch hour while I was working in what was pretty much an administrative management role, but not in media, I started going in and watching how radio programs were made. And love at first sight almost feels like an understatement. I'd done bits of radio when I was living overseas, but mostly as a guest, and so, or as a commentator, or as a one of those mouthy twits that sits on a panel. This was my first foray into how does this actually work? What is the technical function of this? How do we build a program? How do we start a narrative? And I was just completely smitten from that moment. So I ended up every day working in a production role with ABC Rural. When that contract ended, I kind of walked over to 774, which was on the same floor, ABC Local Radio, and I said, what can I do? And so they put me on Saturday and Sunday mornings producing Helen Razor and another woman, which was a lovely entree into the madness that is celebrity. And from there, I kind of spent 7 years. I worked with John Fain in the end for 4 or 5 years with incredible people who were never, ever scared to teach me things that I needed to know and understand. And as a result of that, and as a producer of probably the best PR hit in town, because the spots couldn't be bought, I just had doors open to me that were fascinating. And it was around kind of 2005, 2006 that I got involved with the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival and started hosting masterclasses at the Langham, and kind of became an ambassador for the festival. And that carried on for 6 or 7 years. And so that gave me a wonderful glimpse back into what our industry is. And so I left the ABC and went, okay, I've got all of these things that I can do. I've got all of these different pots of knowledge and these little kind of bowls of skill. How do I put all of this together? And so I started kind of consulting with brands and working with communication strategy and marketing and, all of these various things. I had lots of journalists at my fingertips, so getting a story was not as challenging as it should have been. And ultimately realized there is a space where I can have my finger in the hospitality pie and know exactly what's going on in the industry without having to work the industry. And so that kind of continued on in one way or another until until that very wintry day where my now husband, and I kind of took a train journey to Ballarat and fell in love with this building.
Did you have you had learnings from sort of your long career in sort of media and branding that have been useful now you've sort of gone back into hospitality and hotel?
You would think so, but it's interesting. I struggle. I don't say I struggle, but getting media coverage for our venue here has been a challenge. And I still kind of sit back and I think, I did some reviewing for very well-known publications and stuff, and trying to get a reviewer here has been a real struggle. So I don't know whether it's too much familiarity. I don't know whether it's a struggle for them. There's kind of 3 or 4 venues in Ballarat for the last 3 years. Those 3 or 4 venues have got a hat. Those 3 or 4 venues got a lot of the, the attention and all of that. So we've probably had to work a little bit harder. We're not from Ballarat. We were new. We were different. Our offer was very, very different. So we kind of had to work a little bit harder, and we're actually seeing the fruits of that start to evolve now, 2.5 years down the track. So, one of the hazard places is now gone. Another one of the hazard places is now very different. So I think. As we come into the reviewing season this year, I don't know, people may look at us, they may not, they may go, no, these guys are still not where we need them to be. I don't know. I've had customers sit in our restaurant who have said, we eat out all the time. We have eaten at the best restaurants in Melbourne, Sydney, London, whatever. We've eaten Michelin stars, and this experience is equal to what we have had. And it's equal to what we've had, not because it is precise, but because of the way you make us feel. This experience is what it is. It's not pretentious. It's not overwhelming. It's an experience, but it's an experience in which we feel really relaxed. So by the time they leave my doors, I'd see people leave with a smile and I get a hug or what have you as I see them out the door, not because it's anything other than all of this sort of culmination of all of these skills. So that part of it is okay. The next bit for us is, or for me, is how I juggle, and I'll go back to the very beginning of our conversation, how I juggle housekeeping and the cafe and the restaurant and the bar and, the marketing and the finance and all of these things. Like I've never got a to-do list that is not full. Because the minute I strike one thing off, I need to add another. So, that's managing 15 or 16 people. That's, making sure that our team, and we're very committed to our team, making sure that our team is happy and that they feel empowered and that they are enjoying what they do and that they know that we have faith in them and trust them and want them to be at their best. So that takes a whole kind of pot of energy and knowledge to make sure that our team is taken care of. And then, I've got to scoot out and get some flowers because the flowers on the tables in the restaurant in our little bud vases are looking a bit tired. I can't have that. And then I need to swing by and get some beer because one of our deliveries hasn't arrived, and there's one of my regulars I know is coming in tonight and I know will want to drink a particular beer and it hasn't arrived yet. It may be the delivery days are all mucked up this week because of Easter. So there's all of those little things that have to happen in a day. And I talk about Jigsy a lot. My husband, he's taking care of the kitchen. We had a photo shoot yesterday afternoon for a pie competition we're doing, and he's got a full restaurant to prepare for the weekend. We've got to look at what we're doing tomorrow for Good Friday because people are going to be looking for options outside of bacon and steak sandwiches and burgers. So this kind of thought process that he's completely absorbed with. And then my brother Paul, who is about to retire, I think he's 67 and starting to physically be well done. He's also looking at the things that he needs to make sure that, we've got the packaging and the chemicals we need to get through until Wednesday because that's basically when we can next have a delivery. And so we're all quite absorbed with all of these little things that have got to be done, and you throw in public holidays, and you throw in functions and events that we're doing on nights that we're not open, and so there's so much that's got to be done. And every day when I think, right, I can breathe today, I can just take a half an hour and hide in a room, that doesn't happen because it's, oh, hang on, yes, I've got to fix the vacuum cleaner, or the vacuum cleaner bags haven't arrived, so I've got to go and try and find them, and the vacuum cleaner store that used to be here is closed down, so where are they coming from? So it's just this constant evolution and kind of roundabout of change. And look, I was really good in food and beverage. I was really good in managing a team. I was really good in the times that I kind of worked in individual silos within hotels, but never at this level where everything was on my plate.
You grew up in the country, but after a career sort of living in big cities, not just in Australia, but around the world as well, what's the move to Ballarat been like for you personally?
It's been fantastic. I probably needed someone to press a brake pedal for me. I tend to go at 100 miles an hour, very well fueled by our excellent coffee, but I had to slow down because I got to Ballarat and I'm like, right, I need this. I need to build a casing for the exhaust fan that's going into our cafe because that doesn't exist, and we need that. We need that to open in 5 weeks, and so I want that done. And everyone's around here, yeah, you can have it in 8 weeks. I'm like, no, that's not an answer. And they're like, it is an answer because it's the only one you're going to get. So it's allowed me to slow down. I drink much less. I have a kind of policy that I don't drink in my office, and I'm in my office 5 or 6 days a week. My office is this hotel. So I drink far less, so I've got a bit more clarity, which is a very strong thing, I think, for me. But I think it's been really lovely for us both. With Jigsy and I have been able to make some wonderful friends. I had connections here. Sarah Kwan, that was formerly of Melbourne Food and Wine. She's the CEO of Sovereign Hill here. So, I had a couple of other mates who are out in this region. So we were able to kind of land and go, we are not completely alone and isolated from our network. We're an hour and 40 minutes on the train into Melbourne. It's an hour and 20-minute drive if I'm driving and there's not works on the West Gate. So we're not that far away, but we are far enough away that life takes on a very different pace.
Yeah.
Conversations are a little longer and more in depth and a little less transactional. I kind of got to this point where in the big cities, kind of like, right, get this done, right, move to the next thing, there is that thing, very kind of ordered and very busy, and you're constantly, I'll catch up with you and I'll meet someone at that bar, and then I've got dinner over there and there's an opening I have to attend and I need to stop and do this thing. A lot of that is no longer part of my everyday, and I do miss those wonderful connections, but those people I want to see, I see anyway. And I probably got on a bit of a hamster wheel of every night there was something on that I could go to, that I'd been invited to, that I could eat and drink and watch and participate. But I don't know that was probably in my best interest. So I'm kind of now I get up and we're about to rescue a dog, and so that means we'll walk in the park, and maybe we'll make a coffee and take with us because we've got such good coffee at our fingertips. We have a cafe that's connected to our business, and the coffee is amazing. So we'll kind of do that whole let's go for a walk in the park with the dog, and then we all come to work, and some nights we'll finish late, other nights we don't. We might be done, and the change of season or the removal of daylight saving means it's kind of like where we used to maybe finish at 11 p.m, we might finish at 10 p.m. because people have been in earlier and they're done earlier. We switched from having a restaurant that was purely 6 or 8 course degustation to now having an a la carte menu. So people are still spending about the same, which is great, but they're just eating a little less. So that's been a huge change in the business, which has been outstandingly good. And where on a Wednesday, Thursday night, lights are on, are people coming? We are now like, the lights are on, we're ready because people are coming.
And we've been able to, people just kind of walk in. We had last night a perfect example. There was a funeral here yesterday of a very well-known person in the community, and two or three couples individually kind of said, look, why don't we just go down and see Pete and have a glass of wine and a snack at the bar? And that turned into these kind of six people sitting there having this lovely night for 3 or 4 hours, and eating main courses at the bar and drinking some wine and drinking some gin. And I had a couple of tables in the restaurant that were kind of like, this is a lovely atmosphere because they could hear the noise from the bar, which carries through to the restaurant. So it was kind of this really random evening where at 4 o'clock, I said to my staff member, you don't need to come in because it's dead. And when I left at 10 o'clock, I kind of went, that was a bit of a bit of fun because I was busy. So, that going to a la carte and giving people choices has been a fundamental shift that's worked for us. But we ultimately kind of life has taken on a very different pace, and I think that is not a bad thing for me.
Well, it's amazing how you've transformed Hotel Canberra in just a couple of years. I can't wait to see what you do from here. What do you love about what you do?
It depends on the day you ask, but mostly, I think I alluded it to before. I was kind of born into a family where you always make a place at the table. Service is there in one way or another. So being able to fulfill that every day and make people happy with a drink or a conversation at the bar because they're there by themselves, or a really well-made plate of food, those simple things in life really can change a person's day. So for me, it's seeing that change. It's witnessing the joy in people when we do something that is outside of what they expect, which is most of what we do. Just the kids. There was two kids, the family that live up the road. They're probably in once every 2 weeks. We've got to know these two kids because they're just a couple of lovely little girls. They came in the other day. They wanted to come in and have some lunch because they had made Easter cards for myself and Jigsy and Paul. And so they wanted to bring them, knowing they were coming, they wanted to come down and just make sure they saw us and bring us an Easter card. That kind of stuff is can't be quantified by dollars in the bank, or it's just this joy that we create and give to people. And being able to do that is something I think that has been in my DNA for all of my life, in one way or another. I've always been involved in community service, and so this is kind of a way that I can continue to serve people and bring people joy, or bring about a change in their day that might be just that tiny little thing they needed to have a more positive day. And it's that stuff is simple. That stuff doesn't cost money. That just costs a bit of effort and time, and that inherent thing that is in humanity, that is within every one of us, compassion, and being able to see that at the end of a service or an experience for a customer is something that I could never put a price on. And I think, again, back to what I started with earlier, AI can never replace that. AI can replace anything that we do. We can have robots in a kitchen making food, but nothing replaces that connection of humanity. AI will never feel compassion or joy or that sense of satisfaction that you've really made a difference in somebody's day. And, give me all the machines that make our job easier, but you'll never take that away. And I think Jigsy, he just effuses joy. He walks into the restaurant every night. He makes sure he visits every table. He loves the feedback directly from the customer, the guest, to tell him that piece of food was amazing, or it took them on a journey somewhere from their past and reminded them of something that was incredibly positive or heartwarming or sad. So being able to do that with food and drink and service and hospitality is an incredible joy. And I think I'll have that till I die. I don't think I'll ever lose that.
Well, Pete, what an absolute joy to catch up with you after quite a bit of time too, to hear just a part of your story. Please keep in touch, and I can't wait to see where you take Hotel Canberra from here.
Thank you, buddy. It's been so nice to chat.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep, Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.